Hi everyone, this is Dr. Johnson and this lecture is on protein. By the end of this video, you should be able to identify complete and incomplete proteins, describe the functions of protein within the body, and explain essential amino acids. Protein breaks down into amino acids in our body, and then those amino acids build up protein in our body. Proteins and amino acids are used to help with our pH balance. It helps with our immune system. It helps make hormones. Of course, the obvious, it helps with our muscle tissue. It helps with our fluid balance, and it helps make enzymes. Enzymes, again, help us break down our food. Protein should be about 10 to 35% of our total calories. And we're really efficient at using extra protein in our bodies and using the leftover of when we break down protein to then make more proteins in our body, but we don't store extra protein. So if we're consuming a large quantity of protein and our body doesn't need the amino acids, we're actually just going to convert it to fat. Now, to give you a reference point, the average adult needs about 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram. So someone, for example, who weighs 70 kilograms should be having about 70 grams of protein per day. Adults who are older should have at least 1 gram per day. And then people who are under stress, so let's say a hospitalized patient or an active person, should have anywhere from 1.25 to 2 grams per kilogram of protein per day. So if you looked at that person who, again, was super active, if they weigh 70 kilograms, they should have about 140 grams of protein per day. People who are under physical stress do require additional protein because your body is breaking down that protein at a higher rate. So people who have wounds or infections, they've had surgery, or a burn patient, it's caused trauma to the tissues within the body. Therefore, they're turning over protein a lot faster, meaning they're breaking down their body protein at a higher rate than normal. Therefore, they're going to require more protein. So when we look at protein, protein is a combination of amino acids, and the amino acid chemical structure have all of these commonalities. It has a carbon group, a hydrogen group, a nitrogen group, which is this purple one here, and an amino group, which is R. So this amino group determines which amino acid it is. And this nitrogen is the unique aspect of a chemical structure of protein that is not found in fat or carbohydrates. And this nitrogen is actually how we can measure to see if that particular person is consuming too much or too little protein based off of how much body proteins they're turning over. So amino acids can be similar to when we look at the chemical structure, 2 amino acids, 3 amino acids, or 4 to 10 amino acids. So it would be a dipeptide, oligopeptide, and then a polypeptide bond. So these are some examples over here, dipeptide, etc. And then we get these long strands of amino acids that have these polypeptide bonds. So each of these little individual hooks or puzzle pieces are a different amino acid. They bond together, and then that determines the structure of the protein. And that structure determines the shape. So, for example, this is a quaternary chemical structure of the protein's amino acid, and this is a sample of hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is found in our bodies. So it is highly specific, these amino acids, and it's very dependent on that sequencing. If you remember back to, like an A&P class, learning about the different amino acid sequencing. So when we look at our foods, we have 20 different amino acids that are found in our foods. And the essential here are in the red, and this essential is meaning that they are required to be consumed in our diet and our body cannot make them. Whereas the conditional and the non-essential amino acids, which is your yellow and your green, mean that you actually can make them in your body. So if you're deficient in them, your body can make them by actually just transferring this R group. Now, this yellow one here, this means that they can become essential because, let's say, for example, you have that burn patient. They are trying to turn over their body proteins at such a rapid rate to heal that they're not able to actually make this amino acid anymore. Therefore, it has to be provided in the diet. But right now, we just have these 9 essential for, an average normal person. These 9 essential amino acids are what we have to consume in our diet. And this is important because depending on what your preference and dietary patterns are, you may have a hard time getting essential amino acids. Fun little fact about me is Valine is one of my middle names. I actually have 2 middle names. And when I was studying nutrition, I took a basic intro to nutrition class when I was in college, and I was learning about amino acids. And I saw that valine was an amino acid, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm destined to become a dietitian. My middle name is an amino acid. So I always like to share that with students. I think it's kind of fun. We can also classify amino acids as a branched chain amino acid. So there are 3 branched chain amino acids, which is leucine, valine or valine, and isoleucine. They are the ones that get promoted on your protein shakes of having a high amount of branched chain amino acids to help with muscles. That is the dominant amino acid that is found in skeletal muscle. However, if you are going to take some type of supplement, you want to make sure that it's a blend of all of these amino acids. For example, leucine recently has been shown that as you increase the amount of leucine in your diet, you're able to increase muscle tissue synthesis, so basically gain more muscle mass. And that can be important for athletes or people who are trying to lift weights and get stronger. But the problem with that is that all 3 of these share the same pathway of absorption. So if you're flooding the system with a leucine supplement, then you may not be able to absorb valine and isoleucine. And the problem with that is that both of those are essential, so you could potentially become deficient. So we don't need a protein supplement. We can actually get our protein requirements met through our dietary intake every day. And a protein supplement is only necessary, again, to supplement what you're unable to get through your food. So why is that complete and incomplete protein important, and how does it have to do with your essential amino acids? As I was saying, those essential amino acids are required to be consumed in our food. Our body does not make them. Complete proteins contain all 9 essential amino acids. And this complete protein is typically coming from your animal products, things like your eggs, your chicken, your fish, your milk, your yogurt. All of that is going to have all 9 essential amino acids in it. Your incomplete proteins are going to be missing one or more of those essential amino acids. So that is typically coming from plant-based foods. So yes, we do have a small amount of protein found in our fruits and our vegetables and nuts, for example, but they are missing one or more of those essential amino acids. Therefore, eating complementary plant-based proteins can help you meet all of your essential amino acids. What do I mean by that? Well, the amino acid that's missing in rice is found in beans, and then the amino acid that's missing in beans is found in rice. Therefore, they complement one another, and if you consume the rice and beans together, then you've made a complete protein. So people who do follow a vegetarian and vegan lifestyle pattern, they can get all of their essential amino acids. They just need to be a little bit more mindful about combining complementary proteins. So it is important to make sure that we're balancing out. So let's give a little example here. So here are your protein foods. So legumes, beans, nuts, chicken, fish, cheese, milk, etc. break down into an individual amino acid. That individual amino acid can go towards things like making muscle, or it can go towards all those other functions that we talked about on the first slide. And then what happens is as we are not consuming enough, so this inadequate protein intake, we're actually going to then go looking for that amino acid. So let's say we need to make one of these hormones down here, but our dietary protein has been lacking. So we're going to come into our muscle mass and we'll take out some of that amino acid. We'll put it into what we would call an amino acid pool, so to the liver, and then we will shoot it out to the different tissues that need to be making those proteins. So if we're inadequately consuming protein, we do start breaking down our muscle protein in order to provide that amino acid to then make these other dietary or body proteins that we need. Now, if we have too much protein and we've maxed out kind of that, quote, storage, which we don't even really store extra protein in our muscles, it's just if we need it. So, for example, if you just did a huge weightlifting session, you broke down some of those amino acids and you kind of tore some of that muscle tissue, so you want to repair it, so you're going to eat a higher protein meal. But if you're consistently eating extra protein, there's nowhere for those amino acids to be stored, so we actually convert that amino acid to fat. How do we actually measure to see if the person is eating enough protein? Well, if you remember their chemical structure, the nitrogen is unique. So we look at the nitrogen intake versus nitrogen output. So we want to be in a nitrogen balance, so this means that the amount of nitrogen that we take in, we're also excreting. So you can measure nitrogen in your urine because that's part of how we actually process that chemical structure and get rid of nitrogen. We get rid of it in the form of urea in our bodies. And if we don't, we can actually have this toxic buildup, which is another medical condition that we can talk about later. But it should equal. So that's how we're able to measure. We do this calculation on the amount of grams of protein that you're consuming and how much nitrogen should actually be in that, and then we measure it with the output. Now, someone who is in a negative nitrogen balance means that the protein that they're taking in is less than the protein that's being excreted. So that nitrogen intake, let's say, is 10, but the nitrogen output is 20. Right, that is a bad thing because that means that you're really breaking down a lot of those body proteins and you're not consuming enough protein. Therefore, you might need more protein. An example of this is somebody who's under high stress, like that burn patient. The last one is a positive nitrogen balance, where we actually do want the nitrogen intake to be higher than the nitrogen output. So, for example, that nitrogen intake might be 20, but the nitrogen output might be 10. Now, with certain circumstances, we want that desirable positive nitrogen balance. For example, somebody who's pregnant. They should be retaining more nitrogen because that means the nitrogen in that protein is going to grow and help that baby develop. Or someone who is, let's say, trying to gain more muscle mass, they should be retaining more protein to contribute to the larger muscle sizes and less output. We can look at protein energy malnutrition. There are two types. The first one is kwashiorkor. Kwashiorkor means that this child is getting enough calories but not getting enough protein. So he's severely protein deficient, and how we can tell is that his belly here is pretty swollen, and that's actually all fluid. So he's not overweight, but that is because protein plays a role in fluid balance. And so he has edema. So his tummy is swollen, full of fluid, and that is a signal that he is severely deficient in protein, but he might be getting enough calories. Whereas marasmus is a severe deficiency in total calories and protein. So you can see the difference between these two children. This little guy here is just a skeleton, and that's because he's severely under his calorie goal as well as protein. So this is not as common here in the United States, but we do definitely see it. So in summary, protein has a unique nitrogen group that we're able to measure to see if that person is consuming adequate protein. Protein breaks down into the amino acids, and then those amino acids get built back up in our body to make body proteins. And we can have a sufficient protein intake from our food, and a supplement is not required.